Eric Salmeron was all region, I'm sorry, all central region for the United States. So we had a lot of accolades, and obviously we finished in dramatic fashion in PKs and won the state championship, the first state championship since 1986, and the very first one for the Marshall soccer team. So it was an incredible year, and I just wanted to, come give them their due shout out and make sure that you guys knew and had any questions for them. They're here.
I don't have any questions. I should have came out to the banquet Friday night while I was in the gym setting up for wrestling. The food smelled fantastic, and I had multiple parents tell me I could come in there, but didn't feel that was appropriate. But congratulations to you all, the young men, and making it through the season was such an accomplishment.
Way to make us congratulations.
Next, moving down to the approval of the consent agenda. That will include the minutes of the November 21st regular meeting, November 30th special meeting, December 12th forum, and the December 14th forum. December bills totaling $2,017,488.16. Our financial reports for the month, final approval of the 2021-2022 school audit, and approval of the annual Secretary of the Board report for 2021-2022, amended due to some corrections that we made after the fact and resubmitted. These were all, of course, in your packet.
Linda, you did say that, I didn't remember the number from the first agenda that was out, but that this number is including.
With all the new bills,
Yeah.
yes. There were a few bills that were added, of course, as they always are on the day of the meeting, and so the total changes just slightly from what we received in our packets last Friday.
Are you looking for additions or corrections, or what are you?
I'm looking for any comments, and then I'm also looking for a first and a second if there are no comments or questions.
I'll make a comment. I just wondered if the minutes should include that the public have an opportunity to speak. That's not in the minutes, and that was a big part of what we were doing, was letting the public speak, that it just should be a comment in there about the floor was open for public comment and nothing more than that.
We do open the floor for public comments, which will be down on 6, and they're able to speak on anything that is on top of the agenda as it is, so
No,
that is available.
I think he's talking about the meeting.
Are you talking
Minutes from the
He's talking about the
forum.
minutes from the forum.
Are you talking about the minutes from the forum?
Yes,
Oh.
that's just, for whatever it's worth, I thought it maybe was important that the public knew that we did open that up and we had comments.
Jack, you mean that's separate and apart from talking about just the monthly bills? Or?
No,
Are you talking about the comments themselves that were given?
Never mind.
no,
About the consent agenda.
just that the public had the opportunity at our forums to speak.
The forum was open for
Oh,
public comment.
okay. Well, I think we can say that as a statement that the forums that we had on the 12th and the 14th were public forums for us to be able to get feedback from the public. Insight Design was there, Aaron was there, and he was taking solicited feedback from the community about looking at long-range planning. We also had feedback that was given at that time, looking at the closures that we were speaking, and those were both hearings that we had according to policy FC about closing buildings or facilities. So there was a lot of feedback and dialogue that occurred within those two meetings. I would say there were probably roughly 125 people or a little bit more, give or take, through those two sessions. And those were attended by at least 4 of our board members and 5 on the second occasion as well. Does that sum that up for you? Where you were going with that, sir?
Forum by definition means discussion, so I would maybe just need to clarification.
I know that Aaron will also be talking about some of the comments that he received during the forum, kind of in his discovery process also of giving feedback to the board on our long-range plans.
Not me, not this
Which
year.
of these items would you?
Aaron from Insight Designs.
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been approved and seconded. Is there more discussion?
I would just say, I think Jack's probably right. I mean, just, we know it was a hearing and a forum, but for the sake of the minutes to coincide with the policy, it may be good in the future that we add, the floor was then open to the public for comments.
We can do that.
You're talking about in the recognition of the minutes and amending that in the minutes for the sake of the minutes, sir?
I would like to, yes.
Oh.
I think that's
Like
important.
adding the word
I think we
hearing?
I think we can add that into the minutes themselves. That's where you're going for
That's
the
all I-
minutes for the 12th and the 14th, and just adding in that the floor was open for discussion during the hearing.
For public comment.
Okay, I think we can handle that.
Yeah, having the word hearing
Yes.
in there for legal policy purposes is probably not a bad idea. Do we need to amend this motion?
I believe we can still move with the motion with that notation as well, as it was part of the discussion.
I'll call the question in.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Are there any corrections or additions to the rest of the agenda as it is printed? Yes, sir.
Jack's got a question.
Now you're embarrassing me. I'm just curious. When I went through all the checks that were written, I counted on all the Commerce Bank things. There was 90 of them. And there was 54 from Walmart. And there was a whole bunch from some other people, I didn't even count them. Are those credit card, are those put on a, purchased with credit cards?
Commerce is a credit card. Walmart is a check, I believe, or a Walmart credit card. Yes, sir.
Okay. My question was, just for my curiosity, are we doing a pretty good job of getting receipts on all of those? Okay, that's all.
We have to do an exceptional job on getting receipts for that. That is
Thank you.
another thing that goes with the audit and the Secretary Board report and reconciling of the finances, as we had from Chipwood and the other two entities I don't remember with our accounting agency that was in our packet.
We have a motion, I can't.
I do have a public comment that we will be having, but there needs to be no addition for that, and there are no other corrections within the agenda that we have. Need a motion for approval?
So
So,
moved.
second.
So we moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Next, Mrs. Pointer, we are here for your public comment.
Should be on.
Should just push the button, it'll turn green. All right.
Thank you all for letting me speak. First of all, I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed the forum at Great Circle. That was absolutely fantastic.
Dang, my pen ran.
I'm all for that, but I will tell you that I feel like our early childhood kind of become our stepchildren, because they were first out here without the new building, and kind of put out here by themselves, and now I feel like you're kind of shoving them off, but I know it'll all be great when they get done. I'd like to speak on the bond that you all are going to be, bond and levy issue you're going to be talking about tonight. I understand that you want to do it organized and methodical, but that's been done in the past that way. Didn't work out so well. So I really, really want to encourage you all. I think the difference between the past bonds and right now is the public, the community, your teachers realize you need a new elementary school. You've got a fantastic campus right here. Yes, you may have some egress and ingress problems, but you've got a city to work with. You've got extra area out there, and this could eventually, if you're looking in the future, it could eventually become your entire high school, middle school, elementary campus. The only thing I would ask is, one of the things in the past did not have an ending date on your tax, and I think that was part of the problem with a lot of the public, a lot of the community. I know you're going to get a lot of feedback because we just did taxes on the ambulance and everything else. But when you start closing schools, and like Mr. Pettit said, you've got buildings that are 100 years old. They've done their job. let's get something new in here and increase that. I think your teachers are behind it. I mean, I'd like to think at least 85% of them are. But, you know, when you look at the levy, that's about learning. And the public needs to understand that our education for our kids in the learning process has got to be improved. And you know, your bonds for your building, and we've got to have new buildings. We're never going to move forward as a town in Marshall, Missouri, and get new business or anything else in this town without this. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, so. And you're right, you're never going to make everyone happy. I can tell you by sitting in these chairs and most everyone that's been out there, there's always going to be some people that you don't make happy. It's the majority, and then us making decisions based on kids and what kids need in our community. Next, I'm going to move down to reports. If there are no other comments, I will give just a couple of moments to see if anyone wants to arrive before Mr. Wright comes and enlightens us this evening. He is getting loose and ready back there. I know he's going to be very energized because he always is.
What is this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Daniel Wright here. I'm really excited to be here tonight to share with you some of our progress with our communication plan. So really quick, just to recap where we were, where we're going, and where we're at right now. Here's a quick timeline of what our governance plan has really told us to do and how we're moving through it. So we start with the governance plan. We formed a team K through 12. We built an outline of the plan, and then in October, Mr. Pettit gave a quick update on where we were at. Then we came back together as a team and really developed some details. And I will tell you, that was one of my favorite parts, is because I haven't been able to work in every building in this district, so you hear a different perspective from every single person, and that really brings a lot of information and power into the knowledge of knowing what's going on in each building. So I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, it's December, and we're here to present our draft. Let's move into it. Okay, so you may remember this slide from many, many moons ago about how I want Marshall Public Schools to move into a high-performing district when it comes to communication. That means that we have high tactical skills and high adaptive skills. Marshall has always been great at being adaptive, and now with this communication plan, I am very optimistic that we are moving to becoming a very high-performing communicating district. And I'm really excited to see that because we have so many people helping us with communication throughout the district, and it's really showing the community our efforts through communication. So the plan is split into 5 different sections, and these 5 sections kind of were pulled from our school board goals and talks that we've talked about in our committee. Number 1, procedures and policies related to media responses for staff. 2, district-approved external communication tools by organization, communicating during emergency situations or weather situations. 4, additional external communications. And 5, internal communications. We've heard bits and pieces of all of this over the last few years, but now we have it all in one document, so you can go to one place and figure it all out like that. So I'm just gonna give you a couple highlights because I don't want to be here all evening. I could if you want.
No.
There. Golly. Okay, moving right along. So this is one of those highlights that I think will be a part of, I think this will be a really good tool for not only the school district, but the community. So this is communication tools. This just gives you a breakdown of every building or organization in our district. There's a couple incomplete places of a couple small things, but those are still coming in. So for example, we talk about phone calls, knowing that we are accessible 7:30 to 4 in each one of our buildings. And then it goes through each organization or building. So for example, let's look at elementary. And I'm not gonna say there's a priority to this list, but I will say that probably the first and second one are something that we use often. So Class Dojo is definitely something we 100% utilize in our elementary buildings. And then of course, Facebook. So then you see robocall, and of course, you might see email or Google Classroom depending on the building level. It also shows you which Facebook page you can go for, and when the completed document's done, we'll have a hyperlink right to that Facebook page for people to join if they need to. And that will go through all of the organizations. Up next, I'll talk really quickly about our emergency situations. Making things really simple, our answer in case of emergency situations from our staff will be no comment and direct them to administrators or the central office. That's really just getting rid of all the fluff and just getting right down to the point of that. Up next is weather communications. Now, Mr. Pettit made this awesome flow chart for me. Thank you for that. And in this flow chart, it really shows exactly what's going to happen in a weather situation. It tells you what time things will be done. It tells you who's contacting who, and you know, just so there's no miscommunication through our district. It really does showcase what we're doing in our district to make sure everyone's informed. And there are bits and pieces of this that apply to other situations that might happen in our district. This same chain of command could work for other things. Moving along, and we move to internal communication. This is something we talked a lot about with teachers to students during COVID time. We really put an emphasis on that student communication time being from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., which was approved a couple years ago. And then here you'll see the communicators and how they can communicate. So from staff to staff, we know we can communicate through email, phone school, inter-school mail. We can use verbal communication, and some schools might have a group me or some other way to communicate with each other. And I will just move down to staff to student. So for staff to student, our ways of communicating are email or Google Classroom, and at the Career Center, they have group me for certain classes. This is a great example of why it's so important to have everyone in the district helping out, because I have no idea what happens at the Career Center. So to have the information in here is really important. And then, of course, student to individual staff, email or a private message on Google Classroom, and our student-to-student communication is through email, Google Classroom, verbal, and at the Career Center at the high school, we have some bulletin boards they can communicate through. Next. Eventually, this plan will be on our website, and portions of it will go into our staff handbook and into our student and parent handbooks that will ultimately be hyperlinked back to this one, well, the actual communication plan, so they can see the full details. So I'm thinking maybe some of the charts, the flow charts could be bits and pieces into those manuals, but they'll have access to the entire document. I'm moving quick, haha. And finally, I really want to say thank you to everyone who helped make this plan. Each one of these people put a lot of thought and effort into this, and it was really great getting to share my thoughts and hear what they had to say about communications in our district. That being said, I have nothing else to say. Is this time for questions, or you can hold them all for Mr. Pettit later?
Are there any concerns with the third-party apps like GroupMe? Any privacy or security concerns? Did you guys address that at all?
That is a great question.
Okay.
Defer.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, something to consider later. We're just getting caught up on the consolidation of all this stuff.
Absolutely,
so,
yes.
That's fine to defer.
And I will say there's a couple bits and pieces we're still trying to pull under this big umbrella.
Sure.
And it's coming along, because looking at where we were 6 months ago, we were all over the place. And now we can actually be, there's so many big portions of this district that follow this exact plan, which is amazing.
And I don't remember hearing about GroupMe in October.
I don't think we knew in October.
Yeah, I think that's the case. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I will say, I believe most of the elementary schools have GroupMe.
Okay.
Kim Albertson saying yes.
What,
Go ahead.
are you done?
Yeah, that's fine.
What'd you find was the biggest weakness, Daniel, when you started analyzing this? I know in your background, what did you find is the biggest weakness on our communication right now?
I think that we have these different levels of communication. We have inside the classroom. How do I, as Daniel Wright, the music teacher, communicate to parents? And then we have, let's say, I'm Kim Albertson now. How do I communicate to my parents in my school? And then we're like, oh, now I'm Caleb Pettit. How do I communicate to the district? We have all these different levels. How can we make sure we're high performing at every single level?
Are we gonna solve that problem?
That's what we're moving towards. We're going to make sure that everyone has tools to make sure they can communicate effectively.
I appreciate a lot of the streamlining that's happened. I know that we had Facebook pages, probably upwards of 20 or more when you started, and kind of streamlining those down and actually getting posts put on those that are actually meaningful to the community and actually centralized. I know that has meant a lot to people, those communication ways. So I know that there are probably other things to still be worked out, but kudos on your work so far, sir.
Yeah, I was trying to, being sick for the week when we had all these things going on, I tried to follow along on the web. I'm old now. Old guys don't do well on web pages like that, Daniel, let me tell you. I almost called you 2 or 3 times, but there was lots of things there that I could see where, I could see young kids getting a lot of good info from it. Me, I was always lost. And then they told me they didn't record it, so I spent an hour looking for something that wasn't there.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Appreciate it.
Keep up the good work, Daniel.
Mr. Pettit.
I'm going to start here before we go to the podium, if that's all right. I wanted to, before we get into my presentation for the night, a lot of governance plan things going on right now, but first wanted to make a statement. As perhaps we are aware, there have been some issues go on over the weekend in social media, and here at school there have been some robocalls and things made. The Board of Education's been bothered almost as much in the last few days. The board has had as many calls and emails almost as our poor administration and SROs who had a lot of working time on Saturday and Sunday this weekend. In short, I'll say that with the board's support, we had suspicion of a student incident last Friday at school. We communicated that with the building that was affected. Believed that we had an understanding at the end of the school day that that threat was based in another state towards another school. And then, in the world of social media that we have, there was a lot of other reports started coming in, and that's what we tracked all weekend. And in short, what we found after a whole lot of investigative hours and wellness checks and SROs and Marshall Police Department was that all of it originated from the same place, but these screenshots kept being passed along. And where the confusion came from was that in those screenshots, people were passing along their own narrative with what they thought the threat was. And it went from an incident in Arizona with 2 people that had the same names as some of our staff and students. And then it became very pointed, like there was going to be an incident at one building or one school or neighboring communities. We also had investigations with and conversations with neighbor school districts, superintendents and students and parents in other school districts. But by the end of it all, what we found was that what was communicated at the middle school level on Friday was the same incident and the origin of all of these other things. As unfortunate as that was, there have been some conversation today about, why are you guys here? We did have 90% attendance at the high school today, which is what we've been experiencing pretty normally in the holiday season. I think 92 or so is an average, 90% still good. And then, however, our middle school attendance suffered significantly today. I hope that our community kind of has moved past their fears and concerns, but wanted to speak to that before I got started talking about really exciting governance plan stuff in case there was any concerns or questions to field on that topic. I think you guys have heard enough probably by now about it, haven't you? All right, we'll get to the other.
Our school that started.
No, Arizona.
In Arizona.
That's that social media stuff.
I found a pen, 2 pens.
All right, I'm going to jump around a little bit here tonight. December is kind of the time of year where a lot of things are coming to fruition. Many of the things I'll present to the Board of Education tonight are action items later. So the good news is if you think of questions between now and then, we should have time for discussion at both points. The first thing that comes up for December for an action item for us is to discuss a minimum reserve amount. It's a MSIP 6 requirement, and it's on our governance plan for this month. It is an item that we can discuss again through the evening, and it could be tabled, but it's scheduled for this month. Had done some work on this. This is something that doesn't have a definitive best plan, especially when you throw in a little COVID-19, some recession. The opinions and rules really are kind of on a sliding scale, if you will. Our current reserve amount is 22%, and our annual budget of approximately $28 million. We have, as we've discussed, some glum financial forecast really through 2030 for Marshall Public Schools, but in the immediate future, economic forecasts as a whole are a little glum as well. So for discussion, certainly, but I'm going to make a recommendation that, knowing we're at 22%, that we would consider, and I would recommend, an adoption of a minimum reserve of 20%, which is approximately $5.6 million of your budget. So that is, again, not an action item right now, but I want to go ahead and give you those details as I present. Unless you have questions now, I'll keep going. I see everybody writing, so I'd say you're processing that.
We set that as so we're going to approve it at 9F, but does that take the form, are we going to send that to MSBA for a policy?
It's, and actually, that's something that here at the very end of what my bit of presenting tonight is our CSIP with a lot of revisions, our governance plan is CSIP. And I'll be able to answer that, show you what I'm talking about, but in jest, it's going to be embedded in that document now is how I'm moving forward with our governance plan and CSIP, so that we can and the public can go and see what we have. When I present you a slide like that, that exact slide is now going to be embedded into the document for the public. Okay, we'll go ahead and pull up another slide. This is regarding our highly qualified faculty and staff. It's been a discussion point several times, and there have been some suggestions I'll say real quick too. We've talked about we need exit interviews, and I know I've said it to the staff in a couple different meetings. I don't know if I've said this to you as the Board of Education, but there's just really not a more honest employee than an employee that said, I'm not going to be working for you next year, whether life's taking me somewhere else because I chose to for family job, or I'm not happy here. So we have created faculty staff survey, is what you see here. It has a lot of questions and input that have come from the Board of Education, probably most heavily, and then the district had one that existed previously, and we pulled from it very heavily as well. There was a suggestion a few months ago that I thought was a good one, when we lose coaching staff, that we really ought to collect the same data for them. So we have a similar one, but I just shared one for you to see. This will be a Google Doc that when we get our HR practices sort of realigned, as we all know, we've been reworking that system a little bit, but what my hope would be is that we have a really good protocols for when someone notifies us and resigns, it's in our board packet, and those people the next day receive exit interview stuff. Tonight, what I'm asking you is to adopt the practice, the survey itself, and then there's somewhere else in our governance plan where we reflect on the data. I believe from memory, I could be incorrect, that that's in June, which is a good time, I think, in the timeline to look at. It's kind of at the end of, one would hope, your hiring and resignation season. But that's a look at that. If you have any questions about that, that'll be an action item to approve later as well. I feel like it's one of the things when you start doing that, and really, there's 5 phases of performing, and it starts out kind of storming. I think we start the practice well first, work on the procedures, and probably annually, and it's written in the governance plan, that way we reflect on what our questions are. The first time you look at the data, you might, and I always do, think, well, I should have said that, I should have asked that differently. But I think it's important to get started. Okay, sir, we'll go back. Thank you.
This is also, the exit interview is also going to be included in the CSIP revision? 'Cause
It'll be
it's not-
slightly different because it could, even though it's anonymous, someone might put their name in it or something, you never know. So that'll be a report where we give you a synopsis of the data, but we probably won't let the whole public see everyone's specific answers, because sometimes they identify themselves.
Sure, let me clarify. What I meant was, I don't see it under new business as an action item.
Then I probably messed that up, which would be typical of me to leave something out, I guess.
It's okay, it gives us an opportunity to read it and respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can easily table that till next month and call it a
I
first
don't
reading.
believe I've read it, but I am behind.
The way I'll share that with you all, it'll be as collaborators on the survey, so you'll get that a little bit differently, and if you need a little guidance on that, let me know so you can see it ahead of time, but we can let it wait till next month. We've got some time.
I think we also, on 10, if we would add a BOE member underneath there for somebody to speak with, it listed superintendent or other disciplines within the district or supervision levels, but people may not feel comfortable talking to an ex-supervisor or someone they may still want to have a positive reference from if they've got some negative conversations, so.
And I don't have that in front of me. That's like for a request to someone to speak to at the exit,
Yes,
correct?
yeah,
Yep,
10
we
was
can do
the
that.
exit, yes.
Okay. These are all first reading items that I just want to speak to. They're in the agenda. I want to explain it to the public, as probably more so than the board even. I know you guys have been in conversations with me on a lot of these things. The first one discussed is staggering start times for transportation. This is a concept that'll be it will certainly be a big consideration for us, something we'll probably really need to seek staff and parent input on. But it came to us through that climate and culture survey repeatedly. One of the big topics that we saw in our climate and culture survey was that people felt there were things that we could adjust about our transportation, not because our transportation department aren't doing wonderful things, but years ago the district used to have a central hub, and so the bus drivers were able, when they did that, to be at all the schools at one time, is my understanding. So when the bell rang, the kids went out, got on a bus, and off the bus went. Whenever the school got bigger and people started having some growing concerns about the safety to have all the student population in one place at one time, they went away from the hub for understandable reasons. And now those buses travel from each location. It also has some implications for our efficiencies. So now it's being discussed, well, what if we staggered our start times? Really could probably justify that. It would allow us to be more efficient. We could get back to where those buses were at every door for the most part when the bell rings. Avoid these local routes that are having some kiddos on the bus for 35, 40 minutes. Because we wouldn't have to have those bus drivers drive the entire district. They would drive a portion of it. Some of them in a local route might run a earlier and a later route. That would also help us with the bus driver shortages that we're having like everybody else. And I put this in here just for public input, as they hear it said. Districts that are doing this typically have secondary schools start first, followed by your elementary, then followed by your early childhood centers. The reason for that is your secondary kiddos have so many extracurricular activities, it doesn't cut into their academics as much to be able to travel, especially as far as we do in our district. But just because that's what most schools do, it doesn't mean that's what Marshall has to do, needs to do. So I'm planning to put this out there and work on getting some survey data and bring it back to you. I know everybody kind of gets tired of surveys, but you really want to know what people think and want when you do something like this. We can build it for what's best for Marshall. So that's
Mr.
being
Pettit?
discussed.
There were several comments at our open forum about people that had 2 or 3 children in different schools, and how do we get them there? And from what they said, they were in favor of having the staggered
Yep, I
times.
recall that too, especially our last forum that came up, and you could kind of see a sense of relief. And I've had some emails from parents who say, I've got 5 children. Well, I was one of 8. I'm sympathetic to that. We didn't have a pony, but we had 8 of us. So anyway, that's how do you get to all those places when there's so many of you? That's a good question. And then I think where people play into their thinking with this as parents, who gets home first? And if it's the littlest first, then who's going to take care of them? So that's the kinds of things we want to hear from our parents to help them out. All right, any other comments for that? So these are all some pretty big things, and it's hard to think that we need to talk about all these now, but the next time we're here in a board meeting will be in 2023. So we got to start early to get this work done by spring. The Missouri EOP. This is your emergency operations plan and safety coordinator stipend. These are 2 things to discuss, 2 separate things, but they're related to the same topic, and that is student safety. The state of Missouri, actually through MSBA, which is who provides our board policy, and it's the conference that some of the board members and myself attended a couple months ago, they are offering what used to cost now for free for the next 2 years because of a grant, an opportunity for public schools in Missouri to enroll in this program and create an emergency operations plan that's based on really good data and research for how you respond to everything from a fire to a tornado to an active intruder. And the tool is phenomenal. I think there's 2 things we could do. Now, the district does have safety coordinator in our SROs right now, but the thing is, for example, some of the practices of the emergency operations plan is to say your school resource officer is busy with the day-to-day job description that is their life. They were very busy today. They didn't have time to work on emergency drills, emergency plans, and the administrative side of this. So the recommendation is first that you consider having a coordinator that is entirely committed to the duties of admin, creation of plans, revisions annually, overseeing, keeping track of your emergency, say, fire drills and their times, et cetera. So I think that's something that will be discussed when we get to stipends later this spring. I'd like to put a coordinator stipend on the list for us to pay someone to do that. I've got some thoughts on that, and we can discuss that more in depth later. The other thing will be the emergency operations plan. Really, this person's job is going to be very big as we create new emergency plans. Right now, we have emergency plans, so they're not consistent in every building. Some buildings won't do the exact same things in certain drills as others. There's advantages and disadvantages. The big thing is we would like our emergency personnel to show up at any and every building that we have at Marshall Public Schools in an emergency event and know what are the procedures going to be for that emergency event and how and where will we find those kids and teachers. If it's an emergency event that requires parents to come pick them up, do we have a rendezvous point? Does that rendezvous point make sense? And how will we operate? And who are the emergency contacts, et cetera? All that has to be decided and created. So that's the work that this person would do up front. So a lot to talk about there. I'm very excited about it, though. Have a training in February to go get some certifications and stuff to help us do this really well. I think that'll really help protect our kids and educate our staff on how to protect our kids. Any questions or thought on that before I just keep rumbling through?
So this is a stipend for the safety coordinator position and also to purchase the EOP?
So the EOP will remain free
It's
for this
free.
school year and then next school year, as far as we know, maybe further than that. So the EOP doesn't require a stipend. It would be for the person who manages, onboards, does the planning and execution annually. And that planning includes all your drills, all your emergency plans.
I got it, yeah, no, okay, so now I understand the nature of the and.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, tuition reimbursement, another thought. Another thing to put out there that's just about that time of year where we're going to start talking about salary schedules, et cetera, with staff. One of the things I want to start speaking to staff about is do they find it appealing to consider the district looking into tuition reimbursement programs? As a district, do we want to consider a tuition reimbursement program where we could tie a teacher who pursues it almost like a scholarship, if you will, but they would also be asking them to perhaps commit to X number of years? Have created some plans like that in the past. It's starting to become pretty common. Sometimes when you're looking at salary schedules with staff, everybody, of course, wants more money on the base, but what I've found out recently is that we have 35% of our staff is in the master's column and in their first 5 years, which means I'm going to assume a lot of them owe on it. Well, this would be an opportunity for them to pay off their masters, and would that help retain them? Because it's just as important to keep who we have as it is to get people for the spots that we have open. So I think it's something to think about as a recruitment, and then most importantly, a retention tool. The first step in good attraction of employees is keeping who you have and not having to fill so many positions every year. So it's something I'm going to be discussing with the staff as we negotiate salary ideas. I want to put that out there and get their input and bring it to the board to discuss. So there'll be some things we'll talk about that in the next few months. Probably I'll start bringing some documents and ideas to you and having you vet it from your perspectives as well. If there's not any questions there, I'll jump to the next couple of things along those lines. Tentative philosophy for our pay schedules. This is my philosophy, just me, Caleb Pettit, not even the superintendent, but something I'd like to take to our staff and start talking about is, as a district, what do we want in our salary schedules? What is our ultimate goal, not just for what we negotiate this year, but where do we want to go? What is it that you look for? Do you want to really be reimbursed for your advanced degrees, or do you really want to see that base come up? I want to get their input and think about things like that. From my perspective, whether it be for myself or the teachers I work with or the family I have in education, other places, I think making lasting changes to pay schedules that helps ensure employees can make the maximum over their lifetime is of value. Also, I think it's important when you negotiate with staff that you want to make decisions that are going to be rewarding or beneficial to the majority of your staff, not just necessarily the people who come to your table, though you're thankful for them, but do they represent the majority of your staff? So I've had my first initial conversation with some of our staff representatives. We've talked about that we start our negotiations this spring with kind of a philosophy in mind of where we're going. And I think that's of great value before you just start making decisions shooting from the hip. I'd like to make decisions that help with recruitment and retention. So there'll be a lot more of that to come. My last item for first readings, a lot of things I know we kind of put off last month because we were busy, so I kind of tabled some things and doubled it up this month. I apologize. Great Circle purchase. I'm just telling you guys where we are with that. So we've had some forums and discussions. There'll be some more talk about this in the next reports tonight. But where I have been in my process when talking to Great Circle and with the Board of Education is we have been talking about what would a purchase agreement look like. We've got a draft of what that looks like. We've shared it with our Board of Education and with them. And now we're talking about lots of details, like what's that going to cost? What funds it going to come from? Do we have those funds secured? Do we agree on the boundaries? Do we agree on the inspections and the contingencies? So this is very much still in that discovery phase and details from my perspective, and we'll talk about more of the other closing Southeast and stuff later, but that's just where things are for an update to the public and to the board. Any thoughts there? The last thing that we had talked about, and it's my next to last item, is just that deficit approach. I'm not going to give my full report that I have in the last regular board meeting or in our forums, but I am going to just remind us that we have been discussing a lot the two-pronged deficit approach, that we have to first cut costs right now. We've been talking about the impact of closing fifth grade trailers, Southeast, Eastwood, Tudor House, and getting the wheels of attrition to start turning. And that's something you can't just flip a switch and it happens fully. It has to slowly have a trickle effect to take effect. That's all contingent on the early childhood center location being secured. Lots of things still going there. So we've got that on the table tonight. That's an action item, is cutting those costs. But the other one we'll be talking about is securing new revenue, bonds, levies, for what, when. We'll hear some reports later tonight that speak to that, and that'll get way more into the details and be somebody else's voice besides mine for a little while. I do think that we got to follow the data. I just want to say, in terms of best practice, we got to look at data, and we're going to get a lot more of that tonight. That keeps evolving. I'm really thankful to the public for all the forums. I'm extremely thankful to the Board of Education and those who have been able to make it, and understandable if you haven't, of course, but thank you for all the time you spent. There was a lot of months, a lot of meeting minutes approved this month. So I think we got to keep leaning on we're going to lean on our underwriters and have them give us some input for best approach to securing that lost revenue and tax payments. We're going to hear a lot of that kind of stuff tonight. And at some point, I'm going to make a recommendation that we lean on that data and identify the goals that we want to pursue and how we want to pursue them. But that will be a board decision. That is where we're getting to. But my last item is really exciting to some extent if you're kind of nerdy like I have been here lately, and Laura Jacoby's worked a lot with me. I have a CSIP. This will be an action plan tonight, and governance plan revision. So we're going to switch to that presentation really quickly. And Mr. Wesley, if you'll just help me out, let's go ahead and put that in presentation mode. And I'm not going to show them everything. I'm going to show like 3 slides for why I'm asking you to approve a revised plan. And a few of those reasons are, so we have MSIP 6 is in place, and Marshall, Missouri has been lucky enough to draw Tier 1 for being monitored on MSIP 6 compliance. So when we approved our governance plan, and then that was with the transition to new superintendents and such, there was a lot of guidance from DESE that was just finalized and approved late November, and this is due to be submitted by the end of December. I plan to actually submit it this week. But in seeing their final guidance, there were some things I thought we wanted to do better. I'm really hoping to get some recognition for this going well, though you never know when you're kind of trying to hit a moving target a little bit. Since it was developed late, that's a disadvantage of being in the first tier. This will be really well developed by the time people go through it next year after we've done the developing. But we needed our vision and mission. That's a small thing. We'll skip ahead real quickly. I'll show you what I've got going on. Mr. Wesley, if you'll go to the next slide for me, please, sir. I've included where our data sources came from, and we can go about 4 slides ahead, please. A couple more, please. Sorry. So we still have all the same governing priorities. That hasn't changed. We'll just focus on communication. I just need to show you an example. If we can go ahead one more. We're still identifying, but I'm making it more clearly tied to the MSIP standards. I want to make sure that it's very clear when DESE's evaluating how Marshall did, that they can see. Dr. Henson was really great to do a little pro bono work on this for me, as I called and had a lot of questions about some different things and the work he did for Marshall to create a lot of this plan before I was here. And so really thankful to him to have him help me work through that process. That still looks exactly like it did. I think all of our public has probably seen that. We've looked at that stuff quite a bit. This is after each goal, this has been added. I wanted to add and embed what are our funding sources, where did it come from. That's going to ensure that when I give you a budget message in the spring and we approve a budget for the next school year, we're tying it to our goals. We also identified some success indicators. You know, we evaluate administrators and teachers on different indicators. We're tying that into our success in the plan. Is it working? So for example, initial plan is presented in March 2023. That's our success indicator. Did it happen? And then we've put a spot, which the people at home can't see this, but the last item, it says other actions, steps, or artifacts. So board approval of communication plan in December of 2022 to be embedded in employee manual for 2023. That's what we're saying in what DESE says, the state says, our parent says. That's what will happen to say we did it, where you can find it. And then I won't click on this, but that is a link embedded where if people are looking at this on their computers, they can click on it and they can see the Board of Education presentation or the slide or the minutes. So that puts it all there, and in terms of being evaluated for how we did, I think that helps to ensure it goes well for us. So these are the types of things. Haven't changed the goals, haven't changed all the work that you guys worked so hard on with Dr. Henson. Just added some things with MSIP 6 to help ensure that we have some reflections from the state of Missouri that we like, to say that we've met. And I hope we might be able to pursue that we did so in an exemplary fashion is what I'm hoping for. And that's all I have for my report. If you have no other questions for me.
Hearing no questions, I will have Mr. Hardy from Insight Designs. Still calling him Aaron for once, as he likes to be by first name since he's out on the road meeting with everyone, but just to give you a little differentiation.
Thank you very much for.
I turned it off. There's a button on the side. I'm sorry.
All right, there we go. All right, that's better. Thank you again for having me back. I've been welcomed here over and over again recently, and really starting to enjoy this place quite a bit. Several of you have, I've been hanging out with quite a bit lately, but several others I haven't had a chance to talk very much with. So my name is Aaron Hardy with Insight Design Studio. That's how I know I've been here too long. He said my name correctly, so it takes a while. I was an architect for a while, designed lots of schools all over the state. A while back, we hung that up and got an accreditation for through A4LE, which is an accredited learning environment planner. So it's essentially getting a master's in planning of schools. It's something that instills core values about being unbiased and creating a methodology of planning schools that takes any other perspective that's not my own and putting it in front of my own. So that's what's important to us. And I'm ultimately collecting the perspectives of others, the opinions, to put together a list of goals and values that in the end has the most impact on the students and the teachers that are in this building. So as you go through here, you'll hear me refer to some of the data that we've collected and some of the analytics we've gone through, and that is what we'll be doing today. So I will go through our facility assessment. Some of you have heard this spiel a few times, so I will touch on just a few things and go through that. I'll also break down how we do our assessments. We didn't go into too much detail in the public forum, so I wanted to give anybody watching tonight an opportunity to understand how we do those or what goes into that. We'll go through the facility condition index, which is what's derived from all of our assessments, and ultimately is what we use to help determine an estimate of deferred maintenance that's required. We use that number to compare options, whether we're looking to build new or renovate. It helps us kind of set a level to compare against. And then we'll go through some public feedback, and we do have some initial recommendations that we would like to put out there. Not looking for action, but just maybe a head nod to explore a little bit further for when we come back next month. So the overall process, we are working our way through. We are at the end of the data collection phase, which is the top row on this slide. The envision phase, we've kind of blended those together. As we were wrapping up our analytical phase, we were starting to work through some options on how that might look going forward. But we still have a lot of ways to go on in rounding out that plan. So that's where we're at. We are not done. We are far from done in terms of having an overall idea. So what we present here at the end is really just an initial thought on what we might do to move forward. Unfortunately, it involves a really big step first. We want to make sure we get that correct so that we can build the rest of the plan around that and make sure that we're moving in the right direction right out of the gate. When we come into facility assessments, I facilitate the process, but we come in kind of a three-headed monster, really. I'll come in and I walk each building with the principal, and we do an interview. And it's really to understand the culture and how the building is facilitating learning in that building. and how that compares to how learning wants to happen in that building. Is that building really supporting the learning that's occurring? Our architects will come through independent of me and look at the building itself and try to understand the quality of the building, any major deficiencies, looking at safety and security, ADA accessibility, all those things that are real tangible in the facility that you see every day. We also have a team of engineers that are professional mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, and fire safety engineers that come through. And they look at the systems that they're specialized in. And they're looking at it from 2 or 3 different perspectives. They really want to understand, A, is the systems that are here correct for the facility? Are they easy to maintain? And how much life are they expected to have? And are they functioning right now? So the questions are asked in slightly different ways multiple times so we can understand it might be the right system, but it's at the end of the life, means something different than the wrong system and something else. So ultimately, there's about 150 assessment questions, 1,300 total points, and then you can see the grading system on how it breaks down. I'm sure every student that would see this would love to have this grading scale, but like I mentioned before, I test very hard, so you do not want my class. We get together at the end. They saw it before the board workshop. It was about a day before I pulled all 3 of those groups together to understand the scores, to make sure that one of us wasn't influencing the other. And we just had a quick deep dive to make sure we collaborated and make sure everything was in line. So I'll walk through each building real quick. We do have some pictures. They might be kind of hard to see on this screen, but they're ones that we have shown previously. What will be really hard to see is what's on the bottom left. I apologize for the small print on this. But inside of each category that we look at, again, we look at facility condition, educational adequacy, and safety and security. Those are our 3 primary categories that we look at. We combine them all to give it an overall score. Spain-Hauer in this case is a B-, and but we do break down each of those categories in a subcategory. So what I'm listing here, and I did this differently at Spain-Hauer than I did the other buildings because we have a unique condition here where, 50 feet from me, I have a brand new building and it scored excellent. A's, all kinds of A's. Over here, not so A's, more like B's and C's and things like that. So it did score a B-, but when you really think of it, if half the building is bringing it up to an A, then something's got to be bringing it down. And in that case, we took the subcategories, and this is anything that scored at a C+ or lower. So I wanted, because it was being influenced. So you can see when we really just isolate this facility, there's quite a few concerns. Most of those are in the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. There is some safety and security concerns. There's some adequacy concerns. I think the elevator is working again. Maybe it's not. It's one of those things where it's an older building, so it wasn't when we were assessed it. Then maybe, but those are the things we're challenged with here. There's kindergarten rooms over here that have light switches in the hall. They don't, one light switch doesn't control one room and one the other. They control half the lights in each room. So those teachers got to get along and understand if they're going to zone their lighting. So those are the kind of things you see in an older building that has been modified over time and worked through. There's just some overall adequacy deficiencies. But overall, there's nothing that's coming out of the older part of Spain-Hauer that's jumping to the top of our overall recommendations. There's things that we want to monitor and make sure that we're putting some preventative maintenance plans in place so we can be proactive about them. Marshall High School is a good facility for the community. Recently underwent some modifications and some renovations on the inside, so it does look relatively new on the inside. But there are some overall deficiencies, again, things to look at. But this is where you can see the list gets shorter. So after Spain-Hauer, this is anything that scored a 60% or less, which would have been like a low C down. And it just shows me that there are things that we want to continue to monitor. So while it only scored a C+, most of the major building components and the expensive components didn't score super low. It just kind of all averaged around that same area. But overall, a facility that can always use some work, but nothing that's jumping out to the top of our list. St. Helene Career Center, I've said this every meeting, I love Career Center. It's a huge asset for the community and the kids that they serve. There's been history of some things that flooded recently in the basement. There's no elevator to the basement. There's things like that that just need to be, again, taken care of. There'll be a few things you see me recommend, or at least put in the first tier of priorities here so we can dig into some of those mechanical, electrical, plumbing deficiencies that we need to be looking at. But other than that, it's just your overall aesthetic things and making sure the programming and the spaces that house those programs work with one another. At the middle school, beautiful facility, beautiful old facility. You got to see it again. It's coming again. So you're gonna hear this a few times on these buildings coming up. It has some very old building systems. And those are the systems that are the hardest to fix, and they're the most expensive to fix. So we want to be able to stay ahead of that. There are some safety concerns. There are the panes of glass in the windows, of the doors, I'm sorry. Some of them are missing, so some of them have been broken inadvertently. They're very thin, so they're easy to break. You have to lock the doors on the outside of the room by use of a key. This is the same thing as some of the elementaries. These all go against all the standards we want to be looking at. So safety and security is probably one of the top tier things at the middle school, along with some building system, just making sure we identify any imminent concerns and address them relatively soon so we can keep that building in good condition moving forward. Now we're getting into some of our elders in terms of building age. So the first one is about 100 years old. It is the youngest out of the three elementaries. And it is, it has its deficiencies again. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, it's not like a broken record, but this is what you come up against. There's some other site concerns here, along with the other elementary schools. There's some site safety concerns. There's traffic flow. There's where's the front door game. I know I made everyone laugh last time when I said I did 2 laps around the building before I figured out where the door was. So the benefit is everybody saw me coming before I got there. So, and that's the same with all the elementaries. You don't necessarily park where you go in, or it's not as obvious. So there's those portions of things that we need to deal with. The one thing that happens here is you do enter, although in the back, you enter near the front office. So you come in, you swing around, you're right there. So that Benton does have that going for it. The gym is undersized, and yeah, there's some. I'll say the rest for the other schools. Northwest School is newer by comparison. I've lumped this into the elementaries, although it is operating as the learning center now. But it's you're starting to see the list of things that are below a C level starting to creep up. We're also seeing the overall score slide down to a C minus. This building does have life left in some capacity. It would take an investment. I think the first thing we need to identify here is what the long-term programming at that facility is. If it's a learning center, it would need improvements one way. If it's going to be something else, it would need improvements another way. But it does have some major roof issues, along with all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing issues again. So now we get down to the last two. So Southeast and Eastwood, I'm going to just talk interchangeably about because they both have a lot of the same concerns. Eastwood, I walked into and I was welcomed into the building through the A-phone, and I stopped at the top of the steps, and there were students walking to specials, and I let them go. I got some high fives. It was fun. I was greeted by the SRO when I was walking the wrong way to the office. I didn't know where to go. I was a visitor, so there are some just inherent safety concerns at that facility. Both these schools have the same kind of doors. They have the same gym. There's windows around the gym. There's a lot of safety issues and adequacy issues that come into those. I don't know from the outsider, how you might view the size of those rooms. First of all, they're built out of concrete. You're not going in and kind of tweaking things and blowing out a wall. But they're 100 square foot smaller than we design our standard elementary rooms for. And while the overall numbers are good, in terms of what needs to be in there in terms of students, because they're relatively low by some standards, they're small. They're small rooms. I walked each one of these when we're in Southeast for the community meeting and the one at Eastwood. I went in each room and just try to really understand and feel how the kids would learn in there. And when you think of collaborative learning and you think of how a teacher might engage students individually or in small groups, or how kids might group or regroup and have opportunities to collaborate and work in small groups, it just doesn't really happen because there's only one way to get the tables to fit. And there's only one way to kind of get all that to happen, especially when you carve out a space in front of your projector for reading and group work like that. So these two buildings are different when I look at the adequacy of the facility, because there's really no simple fix. And you put those together with the age of the systems and the amount of funding that would go into fixing these two facilities, and it really starts to bring up another question. And both of them scored in the D range, and I'll go into the FCI score here in a minute when we talk about what that means in our perspective. But you can see, the reason the text is so small on all these slides is because I couldn't fit Eastwood's on there. And it pretty much checks every box. It scored less than a C in almost every category, like 14 out of 18 or 15 out of 18, some high number like that. So not to end on that note in terms of the facility assessments, but let's start working our way forward. So from those assessments, each one's tied back to some sort of monetary value and some sort of assessment. And again, we break this into 3 different categories. Excuse me. The facility, which again, we can impact the facility score the most, but it also takes the most money. I can come in and do new mechanical systems and new electrical systems and new lighting controls and all those things. We can do that, but it takes the most money. So when you're the most efficient in those, we can upgrade those, but we still have to understand there's a cost impact that goes with it, and we have to overlay the 2 other pieces that go into that, and that's the adequacy and the safety and security. Those 2 are relatively easy to impact in terms of cost. They can be more challenging based on the architecture of the building and what we're dealing with, like at Eastwood, with solid concrete walls. We can't really make the rooms bigger or really have that kind of flexibility to make those changes. So again, we take all those same scorings and we convert them over. So it has a different scoring system. In this particular case, the higher the score, the worse the grade. It's comparing the cost of replacement against the cost that's expected to fix the issues that are there. And this is how we also come up with an approximation of deferred maintenance. So when we go, and this is a spread chart, a chart of all the facilities working left to right. It starts with the highest scoring one, which is the worst scoring one in this case, all the way to the right, which would be the highest scoring component. When we have the orange ones, which are Ds, anything over 30% is, the government would tell you that's an almost immediate candidate for replacement. That's just how they can do things. We don't have that luxury here, so we need to be really thoughtful about how we approach these things. When we have an individual category that is above that, that's just something we jump in. It becomes a tier 1 project. We want to make sure that we address it and we tackle it right away. When we have multiple above 30 or the overall building that's above 30, that's a little bit different conversation, and that gets us to where we started going out and doing some public feedback and some of the options we were presenting. But ultimately, those numbers equal about $38.5 million in deferred maintenance. And keep in mind, this doesn't add on to buildings. This doesn't get you a new gym at Benton or something like that. This is fixing what is there, and we're still left with the overall facility that is of that age. We can do as much as we can, but we still have some issues that we're left with. We did approximate this out over 8 years and took it through 2030. We projected what those scores might look like then. The facility scores crept up a little bit, and inflation happened, in this scenario, and that would run those costs to $58 to $60 million if we do nothing. We'd still be left with some of the same concerns. One thing we did want to do, and we were asked to do, was to look at the Great Circle building. So now you can see how these compare. I put some beautiful pictures up there as I ran around during the public meeting last week, so I apologize for all the lights being dim. There's no daylight outside. But honestly, this scored as one of the better buildings across the district. Now, you walk in and you see stains on the carpets and kind of walls that are all kind of torn apart from things being torn off. Keep in mind, those are cosmetic. And I scored mine, and I knew I was going to have some things that I knocked it down on. There were some curbs that were broken apart, and there's some asphalt that needs to be fixed, and but these are cosmetic things. What scared me was I had no idea what the MEP system would be like. So I sent my engineer out there. I had no idea what he's going to come back with, because he hammered some of these other buildings pretty hard, so I was worried. It was great. There's like nothing in there that says anything about, except for the electrical system. And it wasn't even that bad. It was just like, fix this and tweak that kind of stuff. So, and it had some of the life safety things. And a lot of that geared around what the facility was. It was a highly secure facility for what it was, but to the sacrifice that it probably need to back it up a little bit to make it a better elementary school with some of the different wayfinding and signage and exiting. It's kind of a confusing building to get through. So those are the things that can be addressed. So everything that was a deficiency, I looked at like, well, it's either A, we're not going to use that end of the building or something, for something maybe educationally based, or it's cosmetic and it can be improved. And remember, that's the stuff, adequacy is stuff that we can improve relatively inexpensively, have an high impact, and really affect the space. So I compared that up against the other elementaries, just so we can see what those facilities would look like if I geared them and threw them all together. It's pretty good overall. Again, this doesn't mean you can just move, it's move-in ready. It's not a house like that you would market that way, needs some love, something like that. But the bones were good. It came out really well. And honestly, it's the newest facility out of this entire list, aside from the addition that's in front here. Oops. Oh, I gave away the surprise. As part of trying to understand values and goals. So there was a survey that went out to the community through the district, And we asked some open-ended questions about effectiveness and what is an effective learning space. So this was very aspirational in nature. They could tell us whatever they want. I read them all, so nothing too bad came through. You know, that's good. But there were some themes that came together here. And you can see those up at the top. So when we asked what makes an effective facility or what makes an effective learning space, the top 4 up there show the number of times something was mentioned in the responses. So there were 66 total responses in this particular question. 30 of them mentioned some sort of like, we need better functioning buildings. You know, the next one was safety. And, you know, a lot of that goes through, you know, that's, you know, safety can be perceived as a lot of things, and there were some different perspectives on that, but the safety in general. And then you look at health and cleanliness. And some of this is through the mechanical system, you know, healthy building, clean air. There's some environmental concerns in some of the buildings now. And it's overall cleanliness. And I don't think this reflects on the building looking dirty. I don't think any of them are. I think the custodial staffs do a great job. But when you have a lot of mismatched tiles and broken tiles and spaces and kind of things coming off, paint peeling off the walls, it can be perceived that way. And then comfort and welcoming. So those were in there. But some other words that were mentioned or some themes that came up, those are the ones that are at the bottom. And as we move forward through the plan, these are the things that start to formulate the values and the goals of the plan. We'll start to group these more, we'll get more input, we'll prioritize things, take some off, add some in. But as we go through, we'll make sure that any plan we put in place is checking all these boxes. And if they aren't, we better have a pretty good justification about why we're putting something in front of them or changing the priority of things. So the next question was, based on what you just told me that you think is an effective facility, do your buildings support this right now? Like how would you grade your buildings? It was a yes or no answer, but I made the mistake of making it a short answer question, so I got paragraphs back on most of these. 70% had no in there on some level, or just no across the board. There were several that would say, hey, I think some of them do a pretty good job, but there's others that don't. And some of them would explain which, some of them wouldn't. So that's at 22%. So some do, some don't. And then 8% said, yes, they are effective right now. So kind of telling in terms of what the perception is from these respondents. Again, I don't know if this was all elementary staff or parents of elementary kids or all high school parents. We don't have that kind of demographic data, but this was district-wide. But then when we said what should be our priorities, a lot of the same information came up from that first slide about effectiveness, but then we got a few other ones landing in there as well. So I've showed this slide at the public forums as well. But again, this is really starting to show what our goals need to be. If this is what the community say our priorities are, then we need to make sure that we're embedding these in a plan in some way. And my only job now is to try to understand what they mean to people so I can make them an effective solution for each one of these. So we had 2 public hearings, and we went through some of this data. And at the end, we asked the question. And we went through 4 imaginary scenarios of what we could do. And the idea at the end was to ask them, in your opinion, which should we do? And we made them force rank them too. So it wasn't just you picked a number. You had to pick your first, your second, your third, and your fourth. So the options that we presented were do nothing. So that's that, let's just do nothing and we'll come back later and it'll be $60 million and we'll kick the can down the road. Always an option. Don't want to dismiss that one. So we wanted to see if there was any people that would feel that that was the right thing to do. Option 1 was to simply fix everything we have now. So again, just dump all the money into a deferred maintenance bucket, go to each school, and fix everything we have. And we started to apply costs of that, saying, well, that project might cost $17 million. And this was just at the elementary level. We took all the secondary out of this. We just focused on the elementary to make it simple. Then we said we could shut a few buildings down, we could add on to some buildings, fix the ones we're keeping, try to make it the best we can. It's kind of this hybrid model between building new and renovating. And instead of 17 million, it's 20 million, maybe 21 million, somewhere in that range. We take the deferred maintenance money out of option 1 of the buildings we're not doing, and we use that money to build new stuff at the buildings we're keeping. So that was option 2. Option 3 was the most extreme, and we build a new building, and we consolidate all the elementaries. So that was option 3, threw out there $28 million. So basically we have a range of $17 to $28 million. Again, this is, I don't want to say fictitious, they were kind of round numbers that we were working off. You can build an elementary school for $28 million, but we just wanted to get people's opinion on what their tolerance might be, because you wanted to give them a number so they can really justify and see if their option would be something they would support. So we got that feedback. So the do nothing was 100% fourth choice. So every single person that took this survey said do nothing was fourth choice, followed by their third choice was maintain. So those two lost, right? Option 0 and option 1, they didn't get any real consideration at all. Option 2 started to get some consideration for first choice. So that was that renovate some and build some and add on. There are feasibility challenges there that was expressed in the public meetings. But you can see that there was a little bit of a taste for that. But overwhelmingly, 78% of the respondents said their first choice was to build a new elementary. So when we start looking forward on how we put a plan together, we know that we want to address Eastwood, Southwest, Northwest, and Benton in some capacity. Those are the ones that are scoring very poorly now. If we do nothing for a few years, those 27% in the middle will creep up to 30, and they'll be in the same condition as the others, and things we need to deal with. The other things I put high on this list are making sure that the middle school and the career center, that the facilities are being addressed. We want to make sure we identify some real immediate deferred maintenance, so we're not in a position where we got to go drop a couple $1 million on HVAC or something like that unknowingly in a year or two, and it disrupts all this planning. Those two, I think, are candidates to make sure that we can do some work there and stay ahead of the game and be proactive in our planning. And then across the board, we have safety and security. I don't care if it just needs one new door. Like, find it, fix it, upgrade it, and make sure that we have safe and secure buildings across the district. So those were the priorities when I started putting something together in an initial recommendation. So what does that look like? It looks like small print. I apologize again. So the number one priority would be addressing the elementary, and based on the feedback we have, we'd like to explore building a new facility. We've been discussing the site here at Spainhauer, and I think it's an amazing site. We're happy to look any site if we need to, but we can look at this facility. That would allow consolidation of building levels. It would probably ease some of your busing constraints, all those sort of things, help operationally. And it's also, based on the feedback we got, was always the strongest candidate that we're hearing to do. The second one is the safety and security at all facilities. After that is the middle school and the career center, which I mentioned. The things that are in that kind of bucket, I was kicking around with some folks here today. I think there's a candidate for grant funding, or maybe an ESCO or energy management company where they can come in and do some of this work and have it funded a little bit differently, maybe help stretch some bond dollars or stretch some levy money, however we might, whatever that funding mechanism might be. But right now, I would include it in the overall long-range plan, and we can figure out how it's funded later. But there's a lot of those, at those buildings, you can kind of stop me where the deficiency's in, but they can do mechanical replacement, lighting, windows, and roofs. And there's some big ticket items in there, and if they can find us a way to help kind of defer payment and stretch our budget, that would go a long way. And then some things that came from the community meetings that we do need to be looking at. I mean, traffic flow came up very big. Transportation and where it's currently located. Can we use this site in any of the buildings that are here now to help facilitate the transportation process? Or, maybe reconsolidate everybody over here. And then also the learning center, wherever its final home is, making sure that it is done and making those kids feel like they have a place to go, and it's a suitable facility and designed to be a learning center. So those are some of the feedback we have and that I would like to throw out there as well. So again, this isn't a final plan. These are just from the feedback we've got, our initial recommendations of things that we'd like to explore a little bit more. And I know there's going to be another conversation later about how this is funded, but we kind of all wrap that together and come back in a month, or I guess it's like 3 weeks, and have a little bit more information based on this. Unless there's any questions or anything else you want us to look at or deep dive or throttle back. Anything I can say that, if fifth grade wants to move to another building, you want to have a fifth grade center, we can make that new building a little smaller, but there's a whole other can of worms that opens with pros and cons on that. If we deem pre-K wants to stay here forever, then that cost gets bigger because we're expecting to use this building to absorb one of the grades. So, that would change. So we have some flexibility. We haven't designed anything, so this is just some approximations. But if you have any feedback, I'm glad to hear it, and we can design around that as we work forward.
Thank you
I was going to say, I believe there's going to be some other possibly community surveys that you're going to be sending out as well. So I wanted to kind of double check that. I didn't want to put you on the spot and you're like, oh, I've done that twice. I didn't know we were going to do it again. So, but those are ways to get this continued feedback and conversation going. Aaron's just looking for facts, and he's trying to give us the information based on public opinion, feedback, and what we have now to give us a picture of what is now. So this isn't driven by anything else. We're driving other factors around it because of the conversations that it's starting and the other things that we need to put in motion at those same times to kind of make sure this picture is moving forward all at the same time. So, thank you, sir. No one else?
Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll be moving to the Assistant Superintendent report. Mr. Ranky.
Aaron got off lucky. He didn't get very many questions yet. Okay. For my report tonight, I want to kind of recap a little bit of our community forums that we had. I want to present some of that information and some new information that has from some of our surveys. So number one, our community forums. I want to thank all of our community members that came out to listen to our presentations. We held 2 more. This was, so in total 3 now. The last 2 we held December 12th at Eastwood and December 14th at the Great Circle Building to allow our community to kind of check out that facility moving forward. We had information was provided by Mr. Pettit, myself, on finances and some short-term proposals also with Insight Design and Aaron with our long-term proposals. So we did have time for community feedback. We have gained a lot of community feedback, and that's what we're asking for. We're truly trying to get what the community wants with both our long-term and short-term plan, and get a lot of things we haven't thought about, comments, things to think about. We're not going to make everybody happy, but a lot of things with the community and getting that feedback helps us in our planning. And then our surveys were also conducted that I will kind of show you quick. So this is something I presented at the community forum, or at the forums, and for you guys to know. So these are kind of important in our enrollment numbers looking forward. Right now for next year, our 5th grade will have 20 plus students. They'll see an increase for the 23-24 school year. So they'll have about 185 students, probably one of our bigger classes. Before you get to high school, and then it'll probably drop back down about 10 students. It's looking like about 175 for the 24-25, 25-26 school year. Okay, so our Southeast Elementary School, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, they have about a combination of approximately 120 students in that building right now. And in the Northwest building in our TLC programs, they have 22 full-time students and about 5 part-time students. So in the TLC, in the high school, we have 6 full-time, 1 part-time. The middle school, 8 full-time, 1 part-time. And the elementary, 8 full-time and 3 part-time. These numbers were of last week. Everybody knows it can kind of fluctuate, so. Okay, so that being said, and keeping those numbers in mind, tonight we will have on an action item of closing Southeast Elementary School for next year. In some of the proposals this is what we talked about at the community forums. Got a lot of feedback, well, quite a bit of feedback. But closing Southeast, it's probably, you guys listen to Insight Design in our gradings. It's one of their lower buildings. It has 120 students, so it is manageable to move those students out and combine those. So estimation, it's about $35,000 savings a year just in utilities. This does not include any maintenance or updating. Southeast, if you have been in it lately, it needs a lot of maintenance and updating. So it has about 120 students. Southeast has 2 sections of 2nd grade, 2 sections of 3rd grade, and right now 2 sections of 4th grade, along with their support staff and specials. So if we close Southeast, what do we do? So the proposal is when we close Southeast, we would take the second grade. And this is all going to kind of fit together, like I said, in the community forums. But for those that do not know it, I wanted to cover it again. So closing Southeast, we would take second grade and we would move into this building. Okay? And we're going to get to the second part of how we're going to do that here in a second. Okay, so these are the surveys for closing Southeast. We put this out there, I think we had about 125 people, 120 people around both of our community forums. We did get 71 responses, so this was from that night, and plus we put it out on our website for the last few days, and we did get some more responses in. So these are, out of the 71 responses, we had 63 people, and I kind of did what Aaron did. I left it an open-ended question. I didn't just say yes or no. I should have, but so I took their responses, and basically the people that said, yes, close it, do it now, we had 63 of those that agreed that we should close Southeast in the respondents. We had 5 people in the responses that said maybe, they didn't know, they needed more information, or just had a neutral comment. And then there was 3 people out of the 71 that said, no, please do not close Southeast. So that was the survey results for that from our 2 community forums. So moving forward, we also had a forum out at the Great Circle property. So the Great Circle property, that is for sale. The district does have an opportunity to get the Great Circle property. Right now, it is looking like that property would cost us right around $1 million. We do have some ESSER COVID money left that we could use to purchase that property. So the funding would be there. We would work that out. And then I put on there, we're going to estimate, in all transparency, it's probably, if we would get that property or move forward with that, we would, this spring and into the summer, redo the classroom parts of that for our early childhood program. So flooring, paint, moving some walls, things like that. And I'm going to estimate it's probably going to be another $500,000 to do that. And I believe that we have enough COVID money to use that. So it'd be about $1.5 million. One of the things with the Great Circle property, just kind of put it out there, and we have a lot of comments coming back on that, and I agree with them all. It's kind of on the other side of town. I agree with that. But one of the things, and I think some of the vision is, and what Insight Design is doing, so where do we go next with our long-range facility plan? And I believe it's pointing towards, we're still going to get some surveys back and do more community forums, but it's pointing towards possibly building an elementary building out here. And then continuing on with the long-range facility plan. What I think we need to understand as a district, when we talk about building buildings, you're talking 2 years, okay, at least 2 to 3 years to build a building. Okay, and then if you want to build another one, you're talking another 2 or 3 years to get it done. Depending on funding and a lot of things. So if you want to do 2 buildings and start building this campus up as a community in a district, well, you're 6 years out. Okay, so I think the Great Circle property is going to help with some of our immediate needs that we need for the district. And then allow that time to be able to move some of that forward. So if we did get the Great Circle property, we would take central office, we would move all central office, we'd move the Tudor House, the Hoot House, the elementary TLC program, and all early childhood would move out into that property. Where's it going? Okay, so this was the survey results we had out of this. This one I did do yes or no, and there was some comments. So you can see here we had 72 responses. So 58 people from our forums, and then getting on the surveys from the website. 58 people said yes, they thought the district should obtain that property. 5 people said no, and 9 people said I'm not sure. They needed some more information. Okay, so if we did get the Great Circle property, this would allow us to close the Tudor House and the Hoot House on this campus. Just in estimated utilities, they're costing us about $18,000 a year. We would all fit out at the Great Circle property. And these two houses are also, I can't give an estimated number, but they're also going to start requiring some maintenance on these houses. So our current central office. So if we move current central office out to the Great Circle property, what would we do with that? Well, it's the domino effect. So this would open this up, and we would move our high school and our middle school TLC program into a central office. Okay, so right now our high school has 7 students, and our middle school has 9 students. We would be able to put 4 classrooms in our central office and make that our TLC center for high school, middle school. Some of the benefits of doing that and doing that on that campus, it puts multiple administrators in the same area. We have our high school right there, our career center is right there. It's just not one administrator to take care of that building. This also allows food service to be close. We can deliver. They can use the cafeteria. We can build into the schedules to the use of the PE areas within the high school, and they're closer to the athletic fields to be able to use that complex for those students. And it also allows our TLC students taking CTE classes, which we do have some, and they would be right there on the same campus, just like high school students, and they wouldn't, that would solve some of our transportation issues on that. And like I said, we can put 4 classrooms in that current central office and also have some room for additional staffing and some of the staffing out at the TLC building. So then we can move into the Spainhauer Elementary building. So like I said earlier, we'd move early childhood from this building. We would put them on into the Great Circle building, and this allows for all of 2nd grade from all of our elementaries to move into this building. So this building would become a K-2 building. And then this would allow enough space to open up in Benton and Eastwood, and we could move the 2 sections from southeast of the 3rd grade and the 2 sections from 4th grade. Probably we can move them all into Benton. Okay, we might put them in Eastwood, but I think we can fit them all into Benton schools. So there'll be plenty of room to be able to do that. So then that means if Spainhauer becomes a K-2, then Benton and Eastwood, they would become a 3rd and 4th grade buildings. All right. So now that opens up Northwest if we move all the Northwest into the central office program. So what would we do with Northwest program? By putting the middle school and the high school TLC programs in central office, the elementary TLC program at Great Circle, this would allow our entire 5th grade to move out of the trailers behind Beaker, and we would do a 5th grade center at Northwest School. Next year there'll be 8 sections of 5th grade. They would fit with 185 students. They would fit really well in the 4 buildings the 4 classrooms on each side. Have the cafeteria. There's some other programs. We'd leave probably Gate out there at Northwest School, and we're working on the EL programs right now. So moving kids out of trailers, that's a win-win for me. So all this moving around, kind of the domino effect, how many students will be affecting? So right now, as of last week, we had 128 students in early childhood. 65 of those students are moving to kindergarten anyways, and then they would be staying at Spainhauer, moving up, and then 63 of those students would move out to the early childhood center. Our TLC program students would be affected. And we don't like to be moving students around all the time, but so that's why I'm saying which students would be affected. So we'd have 6 high school students, 8 middle school students, 8 elementary school students out of our TLC programs that would be affected by this moving. Our current 1st grade would stay in Spainhauer here, so move into 2nd grade, so they're really not affected. They would just move up, keep that in that transition. And our current 4th graders would not be affected by doing a 5th grade center, or because they're moving out of the elementaries into trailers, or whatever we decide to do anyways. And then we would have about 40 current 2nd graders and 40 current 3rd graders moving out of Southeast and combined with the other 3rd and 4th grade buildings. So in total, about over 2,400 students. We're going to have about 163 students that would be affected in these moves. That wouldn't otherwise be affected.
That's a good number.
So, quick recap, then I can take your questions. So all central office, if we decide to go with this plan, all central office, our social work team, PAT, early childhood, our elementary TLC program would be placed in the current Great Circle building if we decided to purchase that. Our middle school and high school TLC rooms would move to central office along with their support staff. Spain Howard becomes a K through 2 grade building. Benton and Eastwood become 3rd and 4th grade buildings. Northwest becomes a 5th grade center, and then Beaker would stay the same, or they would turn in just into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade building. So that would be the recap of how everything would fall into place if we decided to do this plan. And that's what I have. Does anybody have any questions?
We have very limited questions because we've been living this for the last 2.5, 3 weeks with Mr. Rinke, so we are very knowledgeable of how these moves are going to look and how they're going to affect our district from a board standpoint. So I don't want anybody at home thinking we're taking this very lightly, but we have had this information and been working with this information for quite a while.
Jackie Davis?
So transitioning over to Raymond James, I'm sure you gentlemen are ready and itching to get up. It's been about an hour and a half. You guys drove down here from the city to see us this evening, so I'll turn it over to Dr. Markley and his team as you all can come up. So as currently they are consulting with us as we voted last month, and they're here 30 days later to already give us a presentation and a lot of information, a lot of numbers that I've already looked over a little bit. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to warn you, it's very dangerous to give a retired superintendent the microphone. Very dangerous, but once again, thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you for putting your trust in Raymond James. I'm going to give some introductions of our team members here tonight. I can promise you we're not going to go through each slide individually, but we're going to focus on some of the more important slides for you. But my name, again, is Alan Markley. I spent 21 years in the same chair that Mr. Pettit spent as a superintendent. I was thinking to myself, I attended over 400 school board meetings. Now, if that's not a crazy thing to do, but it was, just an opportunity of a lifetime, the career I had. I was in a district from 800 kids to where I retired of over 9,000 in the city at Raytown. I have along with me here Dr. Mike Reich from Platte County. 13 years as superintendent. Platte County was one of the fastest growing school districts in the state of Missouri, so he was involved in multiple building projects over the years. And then we have Mr. Greg Varnberg, who has been in public finance for 35 years, has done over 1,100 bond issues. So he, I would say, has seen it all. But he has been a member of this of Raymond James longer than we have. But he's going to lead us through some of the financing that we have here for you tonight. And I just had this thought as I've been sitting here and all the great things that are going on, you're working on. I mean, you are juggling many different things, and it's a lot of work. I get that. And even though it may seem like you've got, just a heavy burden in some of these buildings, you've got an opportunity, a golden opportunity here to do something that, you haven't done in this community in a long time by building a new building, but ultimately, you're going to be making the difference in the life of a child and children, many children to come. So we're looking forward to helping you with that. I know you're looking forward to getting that process going, and we will be here every step of the way for you. So, Mr. Barnberg, you want to start?
Thank you. Good evening, and again, Greg Varnberg with Raymond James, and we really appreciate the chance to help you with your project and be here this evening to talk about the project and how you might finance it. And Alan had mentioned all of the bond issues I've been involved in. I think every single one of those I followed the architect, and I've often thought I should have been an architect because they get to talk to you about the solutions. I get to talk to you about how are you going to pay for it. It's a little less exciting, but still important. And so anytime we start a financing analysis, we look at some of the historical information for the school district. We want to look at where your tax levy has been what your assessed valuation growth rate has been, and because those all become important in terms of developing a plan of finance, and then also the assumptions that we use in showing you what a future bond issue or tax levy financing might look like. We started with the tax levy history, and one thing that I would point out here is when you look at this, I believe your current levy is now down to, I believe, 283. And you look back over the years, it's been as high as 355. So you're 72 cents lower today than where you were not too many years ago in terms of that tax levy. The other thing we look at is the assessed valuation growth rate. And we want to look at how is the district's tax base or assessed valuation grown over the years? What's the average growth rate? What should we use moving forward? And when we develop a plan of finance, we want to be conservative enough, but we don't want to be so conservative that we overstate the tax levy or what it costs to repay it. But we also don't want to be so aggressive that if we estimate too high, then, and you don't see that growth rate in the future, then that can put upward pressure on a tax levy, or if you have a bond issue, or minimize the amount of proceeds you have if you vote a tax levy. Here you've had really nice growth the last 3 years. Over the last 10 years, you've grown at about 3.47%. You'll see in our financing analysis that we're looking at a 2% growth rate on your assessed valuation for the financing analyses that we've prepared. So then when you kind of move ahead and you start thinking about, okay, school districts in Missouri, how do they finance improvement projects? We've talked about some of the needs, some of the solutions, and there are really two primary financing vehicles available to school districts. One is to go ask voters for permission to issue general obligation bonds. And general obligation bonds require either a 4/7 or 2/3 voter approval and can be repaid over a 20-year period. The other option is, instead of asking for voter approval of a bond issue, you ask for voter approval of a tax levy increase, a specific amount. And from that specific amount, we can issue what are called certificates of participation, which is really a form of lease purchase financing. So instead of requiring that 2/3 or 4/7 voter approval, it only requires a simple majority. And for a lot of school districts, that voter approval hurdle, if you will, is a pretty important consideration in how you might want to move forward, what you put in front of the voters. But another key difference on a lease-based financing where you ask for voter approval of a tax levy is that we can actually repay that over 25 years instead of 20 years. And so that can help maximize the dollars that are available for an improvement project. So with that, we're showing you a couple of different calculations. We'll start with if you decided to go with a general obligation bond issue, what might that look like? General obligation bonds are limited to 15% of your assessed valuation, and you'll see there it's about $34 million in general obligation bond authority if you wanted to go that route. So then, with using that $34 million figure, we ran some calculations of what tax levy might be required to repay a bond issue, $34 million repaid over 20 years. You'll notice that, and I know this is very small print, but it's about a $1 tax levy over that 20-year period, and we're using a 2% growth rate for increases in your assessed valuation. So then we switched the analysis over to that other form of financing. Instead of asking for voter approval of a general obligation bond, what if you went to the voters and asked for a tax levy increase? And again, in that tax levy increase scenario, you would need just a simple majority approval from the voters. You would implement that tax levy increase. And so we started with a financing analysis where we show something very similar to what we just showed you on the general obligation bonds. In other words, if you wanted to have a $34 million improvement project, what would that require in a tax levy scenario where we can stretch that repayment over a 25-year period as compared to the general obligation bonds over 20 years? So what we ended up with is, instead of requiring a $1 tax levy to repay the bond issue, we're looking at 87-cent tax levy to repay that $34 million financing where we're using that certificate of participation approach. So a couple of other pieces of information that aren't in the handout that I thought might be of interest to you. You know, again, we're using the 2% growth in assessed valuation, and you've averaged, your 10-year average is about 3.47%. So I think we're being a little bit conservative there on your assessed valuation increase. But then the average interest rate, we're trying to also be conservative there because interest rates can fluctuate from the time you call an election to when we can actually lock in the interest rates. We want to leave a little bit of cushion. We're showing an average rate that's about 4.9% in this scenario. And to put that in perspective, if we were selling this issue to investors in the market today, we'd probably be 0.5 to maybe 0.75% lower. So you would be in the low 4% range on the average interest rate that you'd be locking in. There's been a lot of discussion about interest rates, and you see the Federal Reserve increases, and it's drawing a lot of attention, headline attention. But the Federal Reserve is really controlling short-term interest rates. The long-term bond rates that we're dealing with, it's interesting, they're up from the record lows in 2020. But when you look at where we are currently from a historical perspective, rates have been higher. I believe it's 84% of the time since 1990. So it's still, we're not at record lows, but we're still in a very favorable interest rate environment if you're financing a project. So that 87-cent levy, and inside the handout and in this presentation, we have some tables where you can calculate the impact on a typical homeowner. But just to put it in perspective for discussion this evening, we looked up the median value home in the county. The data that we found was about $113,924. And so if you take that median value home and you apply that 87-cent tax levy, what is the impact for that taxpayer? And it ends up being $15.69 per month or $188.31 per year. So then we took that same financing approach and we took it a step further, and we wanted to show if the general obligation bond issue is requiring a $1 levy, then what if we had something close to that, 99 cents or $1, you know, same approach, 25-year repayment, going to the voters with a tax levy election question. And if we ask for 99 cents instead of the 87 cents, then that actually would fund a project of about $38.1 million. So you're getting about $4 million more in proceeds if you take that tax levy from, instead of 87 cents, you were to go to 99 cents. You know, please note that these are just a couple of scenarios we wanted to show you for illustration purposes, but we're happy to work with the architect and the administration and the board to any other project amounts you might want to consider. We're happy to run some scenarios and show exactly what those tax levies would be. So then you get back into the process that you would go through. And we have a calendar of events I'll show you here in a second. But we actually asked one of the bond attorneys that we work with, Gilmore and Bell, to draft a couple of examples of what ballot question might look like if you were to consider putting a tax levy in front of the voters. And you can see a couple of examples here. And I would say the key differences between these two are we can add in language, and you'll notice this in the top one. Not only are we asking for permission to implement that tax levy to repay a financing for the improvement project, but you could also put wording in there that helps pay for operating cost. In other words, if we ask for voter approval of a 99-cent levy and we only end up, let's say your tax base grows, or you maybe get favorable construction bids or favorable interest rates on the financing, and maybe you only need 95 of the 99 cents, then you can use the extra for some of the operating costs. So you might want to consider adding operating cost in there and give the board some flexibility. But then also we added in language, and you can see the blanks there in the second question where it says that the tax levy will be implemented until, and then the date is blank. And so you can put in a sunset provision, and sometimes that can be appealing to the voters, that if they know that this is in place while you're repaying the improvement project, and at the end of the repayment of that, it will sunset. So that's something for you to think about as well. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on was just the calendar of events. If you're looking at an April election and putting this in front of the voters in April, then you really start working backwards from there and look at what is the filing deadline, and you'll notice that's January 24th. And so then if the board wanted to move ahead, then at some point before that filing deadline, we would need to have the board adopt a resolution calling the election. It would have that ballot question that I had mentioned. Those blanks would be filled in terms of the tax levy increase that you want to put in front of voters, a sunset if you want that included. And so once you adopt that resolution, then that really puts everything in motion for that April 4th election, and really shifts the district into more of a campaign mode of getting information out there as to why you called the election, what improvements you plan to make, and all of the important information you want to share. This calendar of events does show right after a successful election, we would roll into completing the financing, selling the certificates to investors, and then depositing the proceeds into a project construction fund. You don't have to roll right into that financing, but just know that the process we would go through from the time we have voter approval to proceed, and whenever the board says we're ready to go and complete the financing, it's about a 2-month process before we would actually have money deposited into that project construction fund. And about halfway through that 2-month process is where we lock in the interest rates. So one last thing, and then happy to turn it over to any questions or other discussion topics you might want to address. But we often get asked the question of, well, timing of an election. When's a good time? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about? If you're thinking about a general obligation bond issue, I would say that the very first question the school district asks is, what date can we go for 4/7 instead of 2/3? I mean, 2/3 is just a tough hurdle to get over for any school district. So a lot of school districts will then say, well, we want to avoid those dates. What are the dates available for a 4/7 election? And if I remember correctly, I think we just have one this year, and that's April. Everything else is 2/3. So, but then you start thinking about some of the other factors, and you think about favorable interest rates. I'd shared some information with you, and we still have a pretty good interest rate environment for financing projects. Construction inflation has been a big topic, and when you get voter approval to proceed, we'll then put the architect and construction company in motion to finalize the plan, and it takes some time to actually get to the point where you can actually start construction. So you start thinking about construction cycle, winter weather, when do you want to begin? And some school districts would say, the sooner we get started, the sooner we can move ahead, and maybe you avoid some of the construction inflation in future years. But another thing too is that if you decide not to move ahead with April, and that's perfectly fine, then the next date you're probably looking at is August, or then behind that, November. And a lot of the school districts we work with think about when are parents most passionate, or school supporters most passionate about school or school-related issues. And August can be a little bit of a challenge. It seems like that early part of August can be vacation season for a lot of families. So we do have some school districts that think, well, school is in session in April. Maybe that's a good time to go. Or you also start thinking about other items that might be on the ballot that could be a distraction from what you're trying to present to your community. So those are just a few of the things that we see school districts think about. We wanted to share those with you this evening. But with that, I'll stop there, and I know all three of us are happy to answer any questions. And again, we really appreciate the chance to help you with this project. So, thank you.
I'm just curious. Years ago, if I remember correctly, 50% of the income of two people that buy these bonds was non-taxable. What is it now?
So any investor that would buy the bonds would benefit from federal tax exemption, income tax exemption, and state income tax exemption. So they're 100% exempt from both, state and federal income tax. And that's really what helps get that interest rate that I was talking about, maybe in the low 4% range.
It gives them an effective rate then of about 8%.
Exactly, yeah. And we get involved in some taxable bond issues for school districts, cities, and counties. And, if we had a taxable issue, it would probably be, probably in the 6-7% range, depending on how it's structured and so on. So you do benefit from that tax exemption. And obviously, the lower interest rate, that just creates less of an interest expense and less of a burden for the local taxpayers. Any other questions?
I do not see much movement here, sir, so I know those are a lot of numbers and things for us to digest, and we're also going to be reaching out to the community to find out some impact and some support or non-support for this to be moving forward. We are planning on looking at a meeting, which we'll be talking about in C under new business, whether we wish to proceed forward or not with the project at this time. Whispered to Mr. Pettit, can we get a survey together to send out so we have some community numbers and feedback. We've had a lot of people at the forum somewhat. It's better to get bigger numbers. The bigger numbers mean that there's more support or less support, and gives us a better gauge. So feel free to chime in on these, and we'll make sure that we publicize these surveys, because what we're going to be looking at is majority consensus. So thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you.
And in case anyone wants, Alan, you guys are available anytime for questions to call or email or so.
Pettit has our email. Any questions, just let us know. Walk you through it, you just call.
Before you guys sit down, I want to ask you too, on the ballot language you proposed to us this evening, there were two examples that you proposed. One included the capacity for a sunset. Is it conceivable that either of them could have a sunset if that's what we think the public would want to see?
Yeah.
Okay.
We wouldn't have a sunset.
All right.
The first one just gives the board more flexibility on the operations side.
All right. Thank you very much.
The first question actually contemplates using some for operating. So you could sunset that, and then in 25 years, you could go back to the voter to seek a renewal to continue getting that revenue for operating. The second one doesn't have operating contemplated, so it would just sunset when the debt is paid.
So in our instance, we've talked a lot about our financial situation. When you're talking about that language, you're basically saying that this allows us to address our needs for building while also allowing us to address some of our financial status and cleaning that up to be able to continue to function.
Like what Mr. Ryberg said, about it, let's say the construction projects come back, you get some really good bids, and you don't need the entire amount of money that you approved for construction costs. That first example of Allen, which you could, use some of that money on the operating side to help offset some of the efficiencies on the other side.
So what he was saying, for those of you that couldn't hear at home, basically was that some of those operating costs, the things that we see now, the things that Aaron is showing us from Insight, that are we have to work on these things the next couple of years. If there's an issue passed, then we could possibly pull a little bit from these levies, bond issues, whatever it would be, and then use those within the district for operating expenses, for upkeeps, changes, those kind of things that we felt were necessary. If we're looking at $6 million worth of things that we need to build in the next couple of years or do or change, then those things could also come from this pool or pot of money as well to help more immediate and kind of inject the budget as we have it currently.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll get questions and send them their way. If you guys have them, just please send them to me. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Moving into old business, Mr. Pettit spoke with us a little bit about how we're going to be are proposing how we could change our CSIP or governance plan just slightly for additional clarity, punching in a few more items and some format changes for clarity. And so I will let him explain that if he needs to further.
Yeah, so as you saw there, I gave you kind of a quick glance at the changes. We're not changing the plans, we're not changing the deadlines. We have the same 8 pillars. I'm simply asking for you to approve the format, which I think ties that into the public, to let them see our board reports and our, our actual action as the Board of Education has voted on things or presentations that complied with the plan. I think it'll sit better with DESI, and I think the public will be able to really understand its work looking back better.
I know in all the workshops I've gone to on governance plans, one of the things that they talked about a lot was making sure that it was clear and showing how all the things that you do move towards your governance plan. This will just add some clarity with that, as punching those things directly in so that you can kind of see those timelines and how we arrived at some of those things, in my opinion. Other discussion?
So these are the 3 items, or you had a slide, and there were 3 sections, right? One was sort of like the source of financing.
Yeah, this ties your budgeting practices to the goals, the indicators for how you'll reflect on your progress towards the goals, and then artifacts or board actions that completed the tangible things you do to complete the goals.
Got it? Okay, thanks.
And these aren't required additions, these are above and beyond what we're required.
Well, that would depend on who you ask, probably at DESI, but yes, I would say so.
It points more clarity to one complete document, and I believe has they kind of looked at it and not having to pull additional information to say, yes, this is how we did that, because it's all there. So when you send them that one thing, they can look at it and say, oh, okay, you financed it this way or you did it that way, without going back and pulling out additional supporting documentation.
There had been some discussion with DESI as well, Matt, so regarding like measurement, they had outlined that they wanted to see that districts under MSIP 6 were measuring their progress. Well, our entire governance plan is built around SMART goals. The second letter of the acronym is measurement, but there was not clear, definitive what defines measurement. So I thought to really make sure that we kind of check the boxes with DESI, this might be a clearer way.
Gentlemen on this side, any discussion?
I've fought this thing many, many, many times before, and it's getting better and better. I always just, I objected to the lack of specifics in it over and over and over again. Called it a bunch of educational jargon the first time I saw it, and it's getting better. I'd like to know who's responsible. You know, if we're gonna measure it, but who's responsible and what's the date that we're gonna say you didn't get that done?
That's right.
And some of it got in, but not all of it.
There are dates on each one of those 8 pillars and action dates
Yeah.
set, but yes, and the responsible parties.
There weren't.
No.
I think you see it better now.
All
Make
right.
a motion, we accept the revisions to the CSIP governance plan.
So move.
It's been moved and second. Is there any additional discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Moving on to new business. We need to approve a candidate for the Belcher Scholarship. Just want you seniors to know, we received 1 application for the Belcher Scholarship that goes to MSBA. So it is kind of a little bit less of a heady task for us to push that name forward, so.
Move to approve our single candidate.
Second.
So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is it permissible to ask her name?
Oh, no,
Yeah, you've got
it was in the closed
The
folder.
name is Miss Chantel Richardson. So she will be pushed forward to our Region 5 committee to go forth. Generally, I sit on these review committees, and we always ask to review another region. Probably should review our own this year, because there's probably going to be less out of our region than other areas. So good luck to you as you go to the next level, Ms. Richardson. Next, looking at approval for the independent contractor agreement with Ms. Carol Embry, who has helped us do some other financial revisions and looked over our finances and made some good financial changes for us in the last few months. And this would be the contract that was spoke of, not to exceed $25,000 for continued working on next fiscal year's budget, and also consultation through the next few months.
Did we have a sense of what the next few months was?
So we created a scope of things, but this will include the cleanup from the fire, which we've got some coding issues with that we're cleaning up. So that's the first thing. And then we're going to create internal control manuals to take care of, back to when we had the state audit come in. We have responded to things we would do, but we need to actually make sure that we've done it. So if they ever come back and follow up, we've done what we said we would. It also will tie in your risk assessment audits that we've had done since David and I got here. And I think it's just a really nice, clean way to ensure that as we are taking some pretty big and important steps at a financially fragile time, that we have a little oversight. And those internal control manuals doesn't just fix it for right now, but it really sets us on a path, I think, for the future in the way we create budgets. And that some of that oversight and cleanup is going to set us on the path for our budgeting this spring and how I come and present that to you. And I think it kind of be the next few years we know where we're going.
It doesn't sound like there's like a finite cutoff date, because issues like the fire and still settling up with insurance and things like that, that's going to be going on for a while.
And a new fiscal year budget, which won't even come out until, completed towards June for us to vote on and approve for July. So you're talking about probably another 6 months worth of work that she's going to be working on with the district at various times, so.
I feel a lot safer with her looking at our financials. She's already saved us some.
Paid for herself and then some.
Huh?
Paid for herself and then some, Harry.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably saved us more than we could actually realize.
Yeah.
Things would have gone on.
With all that being said,
Action item,
we accept.
We got a
I'll
motion.
move, accept.
Oh, that's a,
Been moved
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Shepherd. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstaining? Thank you. Next, looking down for a special meeting on January 10th for us to act on some of the information we received tonight from Raymond James, some other conversations that we'll be having going forward, especially community conversations, to look at how we're going to look at future planning and also how we're going to be steering ourselves as a board and a district over the next probably 5 to 10 years as we look in our facilities plan and give Aaron from Insight a little bit more information about what our long-range planning looks like so he can tweak those situations and look at things such as buildings being in service, out of service, and what we're looking to do as a district and how to kind of clarify what our needs are immediate, what we need to address, and where we need to go.
I'm fine with doing this. We don't really, it doesn't really need to be an action item, does it? I mean,
No,
I'll
we
move
can
it
set
in.
it, I believe, just having the date there and looking at it. So does January 10th work for everyone here?
Will it be at 6 o'clock here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have something for
I believe other people will be interested, invested in seeing that, and this is our setup for being able to stream and do that the best.
Well, it's an action, I would make
It's
a
in my
motion that we
calendar.
set the meeting for January 10th, 2023.
What day it is.
Second.
Aye.
I know, I know.
Okay. I was going to say it's been moved and seconded. I was going to try to find the date for you, or the day of the week for you, Jack, but I'll get that to you.
Tuesday.
It's Tuesday.
It's
January
a Tuesday, sir. So.
Tuesday.
So it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? I think everyone's ready to vote without me talking about it this time, so. One of our largest action items for the evening tonight is, we have been talking a lot, had our 2 hearings with the public to adhere to board policy. We've outlined the plan of how moving students is going to look, what things are going to be affected within the district. And so I'm looking, it has to take a official motion of the board as the
So
final
moved.
step.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to approve closing of Southeast Elementary, Coot House, Tudor House, and coming out of the 5th grade trailers, which will be removed this summer. Put a little extra pressure on Mr. Rinky there at the end.
No promises. Finalize.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Next, Mr. Wright's communication plan as it was presented to us by draft in October and then by completion tonight in December, or I guess work in progress. Our governance plans and CSIPs are always a work in progress, but the progress is moving along, so. And also be included in our handbook as that language is being completed for us by the EGL team as well.
I move we accept.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? We didn't have any earlier. I see none now. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? All right. Next, we are looking for an approval of proposed minimum reserve amount.
I have a question on this when we get there. I wanna ask.
We are there for the question, sir.
Yeah. Will this restrict you in any way or us in any way? I don't like to set minimums. What if we have an emergency? I can remember at one point in time when we had a school board that went down to almost zero. But it was just necessary at that point in time to keep things going and keep giving raises and stuff like that. We went down and recovered and came back up. If we put this down in writing, kind of stuck with it, I'd just like it to be a recommendation that we like to keep within the 20% range.
I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in the governance plan, you actually have to set a minimum reserve amount, so it is part of the statute of having the governance plan with MSEP 6. So as governance of the board, and they wanted to increase governance of the board and being shown as before it was a lot with test scores, other things, but actually now it is more of district management, then we do have to set a reserve amount. He talked about 22% earlier. I would like to move that back down to 20 as a proposal, just as a thought process for us, just to kind of give a little bit more of a cushion. If we end up with 25, so be it, and fantastic. But I'd hate to kind of handcuff us if we need to go down to 21, and we said 22. We can always bring things back to a motion and revisit this in the future.
I would not like to be in a position where we can't give raises because we set it at 20, and if we gave the raises we wanted to give, it would be 19.999. I don't like to have my
Harry,
hands
this is
tied.
part of why I was asking you about whether it was policy and then
Yeah.
what the mechanisms of that policy really would be. That was sort of the
That's so we
subtext
can
of my question.
we can just say, well, we set it at 20, but we can go to 18 this year if we have to.
And I don't recall what MSIP 6 says,
I don't-
Mr.
Yeah,
Pettit,
it doesn't
about.
say that I'm aware, though I haven't dove deep into it. I think that, to me, the premise is just saying, as a Board of Education and as an organization, this is what we feel is a healthy reserve.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of any reason that we could not adjust as things
Yeah.
dictated the necessity.
I mean,
to
we've
do that.
always traditionally been in the 20% range somewhere, north or south of it, as
And
I
I-
can recall.
And I think, as I said, what's a recommended reserve is kind of on a sliding scale depending on a lot of conditions around, economically and in your district. So right now, it'd be nice to have a little bigger, healthier reserve, but there are
Yeah.
times where you might very easily be able to say 15%'s probably more than responsible.
Yeah, I can remember fighting about this when I was on the
Yeah.
CTA.
I know you're ready. Go ahead, sir.
Do the powers that be up above us have anything to say about this?
At DESI, only the requirement that I'm aware, and I can dig into it some more and let you know next month what I find out about it. I'd be glad to. I hadn't thought to, but that I'm aware just that we set what we want it to be, and I assume that's so that you can be fiscally responsible. Like when I showed you the governance plan, the CSIP for the district, that you're being fiscally responsible and saying, when you talk about all the things you want to do, can you do it? It would help a school district to identify more quickly that something needs to give or change.
Yeah, I can remember dealing in one of the finance classes where if you don't have 6 months of salary to pay off, then in your reserve, then all those things get so complicated.
Absolutely.
We're fairly we're fairly solid here with the outcome and income.
Yeah.
Would we be better
Not a
off?
lot, but it's there all the time.
Would we be better off maybe at this time to say 18% to give you 4 in there rather than just 2?
I asked Mr. Pettit, and he said that 22 was a comfortable number that Ms. Embry gave him, because I thought the same thing. I don't want to handcuff you by going all the way to 22, and that's why I said 20. The floor is open for a number.
I was just thinking of what Harry said about you come in 19 and a half and we got to do it all over again. Just a thought.
You just change your governance plan, Jack. But it does require, and this, to Desi's credit, it does mean that we then have to have a public discussion about it, right? That we do have to say among ourselves, we need to drop this down, and here's why. So that there are no questions, especially along the lines of what Harry's talking about. Because the reason you dip into your reserves is to make sure people are getting what's due to them.
Yeah.
I see no problem with 20. It's been around 20 for a while. 22 seems a little north of where we've been lately. It's fine aspirationally, and certainly, shouldn't we want even more? Well, sure. What's realistic? I agree, Brian. 20 seems consistent with where we've been, and it seems to be reasonable with what Embry was talking about,
Yeah,
so.
I agree.
I'm fine with 20. Do you want me to move it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, also move.
I'll second it.
That was quick.
Been moved and seconded. Is there additional questions?
Will the minutes reflect that 20?
Yes, sir. 20 is what the motion is.
Not only that, Jack, the governance plan will reflect it.
All those in favor of using
And more
20%
bureaucracy.
as our reserve number, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Next, I'm just going to go through a first reading of looking at some things, so please reach out to your board members and speak to those in your administrative circles to push information back to us. Looking at staggering start times for transportation, a big thing to look at for the public here and to give us feedback in is what group of students do you want to arrive at school first, or which ones do you need at home first?
You're
You
talking
know.
transportation here. Now, when you're saying transportation, I'm also thinking along the lines of buildings starting at,
Buildings will
times.
be starting later because kids will be arriving at different times.
okay, because we had, I do remember when we opened this building up here, and we delayed a day or two, and the teachers just thought it was one of the best things that ever happened because we had extra bodies and things floating around. Let's be creative and make something good happen with this.
Just for clarity, that means we're looking at probably start times for like elementaries at one time, high school at another time. So it isn't going to be southeast, the building that we're talking about, and we just voted to close, excuse me, but Benton starting at one time and Northwest starting at another time. But the sections will be starting at the same times.
And to clarify, here he's talking about starting on different days, whereas
Yeah,
I
we,
think
yeah, we even did that on different days.
what
and it
we've
was-
been talking about is just time of day.
Yeah, so I'm just-
So, also looking at our Mo EOP and safety coordinator stipend, tuition reimbursement and what that's going to be looking at. Teachers, that's going to be a good hot topic for you all to give us some feedback about and what you all want that to look like a little bit as we look to structure that. Philosophy for our pay schedules, Mr. Pettit quoted himself saying, "Make lasting changes to pay schedules that ensure employees can make the maximum over their lifetime and reward the majority and changes and not a few." So looking at our district as a whole and what is the best for a majority of our district and also for the kids within our districts by reflecting and attracting better teachers. Looking at the Great Circle purchase and the continued discussions that we're going to be having with them about that as well. And then lastly, looking at changing the February board meeting from Tuesday, the 28th, to Monday, the 27th.
Well, and,
Why are we doing that?
I won't be able to be here. I've got that training for the EOP.
Fair enough.
well, I was gonna say, so, Brian, you were
Mondays are
saying,
just hard to sit through.
be in contact with us if you've got issues and questions. I was gonna say about the Mo EOP. So I've sat through the, the pitch for it. I'm on the advisory board for the Center for Education Safety that sponsors the EOP. So I've sat through this. I know what the EOP system is. So if anybody's got any questions about that, you're welcome to contact me and ask me about it. And whatever I don't know, Bob Klossmeyer does, and he's the EOP coordinator out there, so.
So we have moved did we move the board meeting to the Monday, the 27th?
Yeah.
Mr. Pettit, also just for asking, I asked how we're going to contact teachers to get a good amount of feedback from them. And we're going to be working with CTA, of course, for contract negotiations, as we always do moving into the spring. And he said that he'll be working with them on trying to get feedback from teachers and finding out representation through that point, so.
And also NEA too, I've invited them.
Also NEA. As there is no other business before this board at this time, I need a motion to adjourn to closed session for looking at legal actions, causes of legal action, lease purchase, or sale of real estate, hiring, firing, disciplining or terminating particular employees, preparation of a negotiation with employee groups, and then personnel records identifiable by person.
So moved.
And
Second. Oh, Matt Beach.
that recalls a roll call vote. If I can get Harry, Jack, Aaron,
Aye.
Matt, Brad, and Matt. Thank you all. We'll be closed for this evening, going to closed session. Thank you.
Thank you.